Hi, welcome back. I've just been casually reading the chat, and people talking about how miserable they are. That sucks. Probably, probably the only advice I have, just around courses and stress and studies. Oh my god, what's wrong with my chair? Is a couple things. One is for some students, underloading is pretty underrated in future terms, like only doing some subjects. I understand a lot of people are pretty keen to get out of university soon. My general advice is to get out of university healthy. That's probably the most important thing in life. Um, I've underloaded some terms, I've overloaded some terms when I was a student. I did half load sometimes. Uh, just I think sometimes that can be a little bit scary or worrying. Um, Other things are when you feel really under the pump. Genuine advice again is like when you leave uni, you won't really, the marks won't carry with you very much, right? But what you know does, and it's like this kind of big problem, right? Is that um, like when all is done and done in 3 years, you can run away from how you did in courses, but you can't run away from what you learned or didn't learn, right? So if you're ever feeling like you're totally under the pump and you know you have to like make decisions about marks and what you're going to spend time on, my advice is probably always to spend time on the things that you feel like are most rewarding to you, um, because that's kind of what you'll be left with down the line. And sometimes it does suck because you get trapped in little like corners. Um, I find university a very strange place because we I don't think education in general, this is not a UNSW thing, this is just tertiary education, is very conducive to mental health prosperity. So if you're feeling down about it, if you're feeling depressed about it, there's all the standard things that we say around, like, you can go talk to the counseling services and et cetera, et cetera. But I think just most importantly is like, if anyone ever feels completely overwhelmed or stressed with this stuff, just like most importantly, just don't feel strange or alone, because other people feel that. A lot of people feel that in different ways, in different subtle ways, for different reasons. But you know, uh, I would have a good guess that more than half of you that watch this lecture, good guess, are in some way struggling in non-trivial ways right now. Because of uni, because of how uni compiles with something else. So just don't feel like you're crushed under a rock while everyone else is dancing out there. And I'm sure a lot of you would be very happy for support. Yeah, I have noticed that as a lot of people aren't doing super well with online. I mean, even as a teacher, people feel you can feel it, right? Like I started teaching 19T1, right? First trimester term. And then like 20T2, when everything went online, was like clear as day. It was like everyone was like kind of crazy. Not crazy, as in like everyone was like a lot more edgy about everything, right? Like just students in general. And I've taught like fully online courses years ago, and I've taught fully in-person courses. And like, I was advising CSE about this at one point, and I was telling them that the trouble with online courses is that they feel isolating. I mean, duh. Wow, give me the Nobel Prize of Genius. But it's like, it's really funny because I used to do a lot of online high school stuff, and it's really funny when you say have a 3-hour class a week with students at Tute Lab. If you just have that every week, it's incredible how fewer forum posts there are. It's incredible how fewer emails there are. And in my experience, which is a lot more extensive, I guess, than a lot of people, but still a very subsample of everything, it's like the problem is when students don't feel like they can get through it, right? Like that's when it all goes to shit. It's when people don't have that like self-confidence, that self-belief, that belief that they can deal with adversity, show resilience through things. And a lot of that just comes from feeling grounded, right? So it's incredible. You see people do 3 hours of in-person class, and because they know they can go there every week in the classroom, in that place with those people they're familiar with, you just honestly see a lot less the need for support throughout the week, in my experience. And I think there is a big psychological component of that, right? But when you do stuff online, that lack of grounding leaves people to feel a lot more, disparate, worried, out of touch, like a lack of support. So anyway, the point was with CSE, I kind of said to them, I was like, look, if you're going to run, we had this talk about running, without getting into specifics, whether a course should run online or not. And it was kind of like, they're like, oh, online might be cheaper. And I was like, yes, I understand what you're saying, but the hard part is that even though online's cheaper because you think scale, the problem is that the more people go online, the more support they need, right? So the more help sessions, the more forums you kind of have to run, because it's just more of it. Like, that's the reality. Like, I would bet real money that if you all were just in person, I would have half the forum queries this term, even if we taught the same things and did all the same stuff, because it's just like, it just feels different. You're like stuck at home. So when there are problems, you don't have those people to chat to. And I know some of you have friends and group members and stuff, but yeah, just that feeling of helplessness, I think, is a lot more easy to come by. So, but there's some things we can and can't help. And I guess the only real takeaway I ever like to mention to people is just the fact that I can't personally fix everything. Tutors can't either. But most of you will come through the other end. I know it doesn't feel like it now, and no one wants to hear that, right? Like, no one wants to have their leg broken and be patted on the back and be like, oh, you'll be running in no time. They're just like screaming. Shut up. But I'm not worried about any of you. And in general too, to be honest with you, like, because a lot of people worry about failing the course and stuff. It's like, I can't even, in my experience, it's ridiculous how few people that are worried about failing actually fail. Most of the people who like really do terrible in courses tend to basically just not even care. They're like not worried. That's how they fail, because they don't care. And to be honest as well, just last thing, I think anyone who's actually worried about failing, and who's been working hard, it's a really, 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 really hard course to fail if you've been working hard, because there's so many free marks in the project, right? Like 60% of the marks have nothing to do with whether your code actually works. And then on top of that, if you're like one of those hardworking people and your code doesn't work, a lot of the time it's because you might be in some struggling group situations, in which case, like, if you've been talking to your tutors, things are sorted out and stuff. So, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing too. I don't know. Sorry. We have so much time today. This thing's like 15 minutes of chatting, so I'm just not in any mad rush. But yeah, I'll just share this with you all. I actually have this big worry about later year courses, and I get really worried about there is a big disconnect between first year courses and later year courses, because for a later year course, it's like, it's extremely, extremely normal to have a 24-hour turnaround on pretty much all replies. And that's just kind of life in a way, right? Like when you, like, that's true on anything really. So I was talking to Tam about this, because I mean, everyone knows Tam, right? The guy on the forum that just answers everything before I can get to it. Yeah, we like talked about, like, we have to figure out ways to like help students ask better questions next term, because like part of the reason the replies resolutions can take so long is because it's really hard to answer some questions, because like it's actually a whole topic in itself, is like, how do you ask good questions? Because if you can ask a good question, then you can usually get an answer like pretty instantly. Anyway, so yeah, 2 all-nighters. Also, just in general, I understand that telling people who have deadlines to sleep is not going to achieve anything. I'm well aware of that. But sleep is probably the quickest thing that will wreck your mental. Like a lack of sleep is the quickest thing that'll send you into a depressive or anxious or stress spiral. So, don't push your sleep as far as you reasonably can. Okay, so what this little lecture's about is that I have this grand vision for a course one day where we talk about how to build prototype software, but it's probably not going to happen because it's a very difficult thing to turn into an educational piece, like a whole course. But in the meantime, I thought let's talk about it for 20 minutes in 1531. So there's a really great book that I would recommend that everyone here who intends to work in the software space reads, or if anything else, just read the first 30 pages of it one day. I've only read the first 2/3 of it, I think. So there's this really popular book called The Lean Startup, which is basically talking about how do you build software quickly to determine if it's viable or not. So one of the big problems I see in the space, right, is that software engineers in general love clean and good solutions, right? Like people want to refactor code, they want to do this, they want to write like good software that's very logical. But the hard reality is the majority of you, 90% plus, are going to be writing software for businesses, in the sense that the sole job of software is to make money, right? And if I don't mean to profit, like, because I mean, even if you work for a non-for-profit, a lot of the point of software is to make enough money to break even, right? Because not-for-profits, by definition, make money. They just don't like hoard it. So if you think about it like that, if software generally is a lot about making money, or providing a service that helps make money elsewhere or something, right? Like, Google Maps, you don't pay for Google Maps, right? You think, but like what happens with Google Maps? Okay, you find places to go and then you go there every time. And then when you click on areas, you get ads and you get this, and then you get used to Google, and then it's integrated into your phone and blah, blah, blah. So software fundamentally is about making people happy. It's about making people want to use your software. Often that's related to money, but in general, it needs to be used by the customer. And we've talked about this earlier in the course about validation, right? Like how do you build software right? Is all this testing stuff we're doing. And then how do you build the right software? Because if you build software no one wants, it's a waste of time. I don't care how pretty it is. I don't care how nice it looks. I don't care how much you refactored it or how you use some experimental thing. It's like, it's stupid. So build, measure, learn is like a lot of the principles of this book. And again, I would recommend reading it. This is someone who doesn't like books. And the idea is that what you want to do with software is you want to build as little as possible, figure out if it's working, learn from it and move on again, at the core of it. So that's a whole topic we don't really go into, but like to give you a good example, if you're building a web page and you think, oh, you know what this web page needs? It needs like another section at the bottom with some extra data or some stats, right? So a good example is stats on your Dreams app, right? You've got this stats page. It's like someone might think this is a really cool thing that everyone's going to love. It's like, well, before you build it, why don't you ask some people some questions, just like you're doing with your requirements piece in the project. And then when you do build it, how are you going to see if they actually like it quantitatively, right? Maybe keep track of how many times the page is viewed. Maybe keep track of what the session length is, right? All of these things you can do. Something you could all do, or maybe you couldn't actually. That probably wouldn't work. But yeah, no, that's too hard. So I was going to suggest something, but I don't think it would be feasible. So that's kind of what this book's about. It's really great. Another part of this book is this idea of a lean canvas, which is really what a lot of what we're going to talk about today is. This will come up a lot if you ever go do any of Entrepreneurship's design thinking courses or any of their startup-y courses. But essentially, if you ever have a friend or a series of friends or just by yourself and you say, hey, I've got this cool idea for a business. What's a good business people like? Or like, what's an idea for a business? I'll tell you one. There's this group I'm mentoring at the moment who's doing some startup-y competition stuff. And they had this idea which was like, let's build an app that tracks what's in your fridge and when it expires so that it can remind you to eat it or to sell it, basically. So how do you avoid food wastage, either because you want to consume it sooner or so you can sell it, right? Let's put less stuff in the bin. And you might think that's a great idea, right? And again, a typical software student I see will immediately start thinking about, what program do we want to build that in, right? And there's like 1,000 steps before you get to that point, which is like, what the hell are we doing and why are we doing it? So a great template, and you can just find this on the internet if you just Google lean canvas. There's hundreds. They all look different. Well, they all look the same, sorry, but they're all colored different. And this is the idea, is that you should be able to write your company down on a page of paper, or your app, or your idea, right? I mean, when you say you have an app, you have to think of it like you have a product that you're trying to sell that needs to be successful. You can call that a company, you can call it an app, it doesn't really matter. And the idea here is that on the left side, you try and write down what your product is, what you're actually building, and on the right side, you try and think about how it fits into the market. So in this case, like, what problem are you solving? So I've tried to emphasize this in your iteration 3, right, in your PDF you're making. It's like, what's the difference between the problem and the solution? Okay, so someone might say, oh, the problem is that I can't track when my food expires in the fridge. It's like, no, that's not the problem you're facing, right? That's a solution. And you don't start companies from solutions, because solutions can be wrong, but problems are generally like real. If you have a company based on a problem, or if you have an app that's based on a problem, that problem will not change. And if that problem is not true, your app is stupid. The solution that you have, though, will depend on customer feedback, because sometimes there's different ways to different solutions, you know. So if you're a problem, you know, so you might say, okay, well, my problem is that people can't keep track of when food expires in the fridge. It's like, no. The problem is that people waste money throwing food out. Right, like when you talk to your friends, they're not like, oh, god damn it, I don't know when my yogurt expires. They're like, oh, I just threw chicken out for the 3rd time in a row this month, right? That's what their problem is. That's what pain they feel, and that's where a lot of your focus needs to start here. So the problem is really at the core of like what motivates you every day. And you need to think as high level on that as you can, because the higher level you think on the problem, the more space you have for a solution. Because maybe tracking expiry dates is not the way to do it. Maybe the simplest solution to that is an alarm clock on your phone every day that says, check the fridge. Maybe that's good enough for 90% of people. And your solution is literally a waste of time. Like, there is no app to build because someone's already built it. You can set an app, a reminder in Slack or something, right? There's a lot of ways to solve that. So getting the problem right is critical. The solution will come from it, you know, it's an app that tells you when food expires. It's an app that scans food in that you buy from the grocery store, right? Maybe that's the 2 things it does or something. Key metrics. What are you measuring? Now, in general, your metrics should usually be trying to determine if the problem is being solved. So in the case of food being thrown out, then you might say, okay, well, your metrics are, you know, what percentage of food bought is thrown out, or maybe something else like, you know, what percentage of food is sold, if that's the particular solution, right? Because selling food is another solution. Because maybe people don't, like, maybe telling someone when food expires is not an actual solution to the problem, right? Like, think about it again. The problem is that they're throwing food out when they don't want to. Maybe they're eating too much. Maybe telling someone, oh, your chicken's about to expire. It's like, I know that, but I'm not hungry. I've eaten as much as I can today. Like, their problem is they keep overbuying, and like, that's just human habit, right? People just buy too much food. So the solution then, you might start to think it's about expiry dates, but maybe the solution ends up being creating a marketplace of some sort, or a place where people can actually like exchange food locally, right? Then you can get into like a whole area of risk. I mean, this is a very simple diagram, right? But you know, someone's, oh, we just like meet up down the street and we'll trade chicken. And it's like, yeah, sure, that's a police call waiting to happen. So, yeah, but key metrics are like what you measure, right? Because again, if you can't measure what you're doing, you can't tell if you're succeeding. So you always need to figure out what you're actually going to measure to determine if you're solving the problem. The cost structure, this stuff's pretty simple. It's like for a lot of software companies, this is quite straightforward. You know, you often have to sometimes pay people, sometimes it's server costs. For a lot of people just trying to make an app, typically it's just the cost of the server or some kind of deployment cost associated with it, because most people are trying to keep things light and cheap at the start, and most people work for free if they have some cool ideas for apps that you have with your friends. On the on the market side, this side's meant to be very much like, it doesn't matter what you're actually selling people or providing people, but what is the market like? As in, how are you going to make money from this app? Okay, well, there's a bunch of ways you could make money from it. It has to make some money, otherwise you're just going to work on it, people use it, and you'll die. I mean, not you'll die, the app will die. So how do you make money? Okay, well, you can charge people to download the app. Okay, you could charge people to subscribe to the app, like $1 a month, right? Like WhatsApp's like $1 to download or something, I thought. Or it's free, isn't it? No, it used to be $1 to download years ago. You could charge them a subscription, like Netflix. You could go straight to the provider, the grocery stores where people buy these groceries to, and you could, take money off them. Like, you think about, there are services that UNSW provides you that UNSW would pay for. I can't really think about, like, what's an example? Like the water fountains on campus. Obviously, that's not a company, but it's like, someone was like, how are we going to make money here? Well, we could either charge people every time they fill up their water bottle by installing an FPOS machine, or we could just like take it from that pool of money that they pay us anyway, right? So instead of like paying for a subscription for an app, maybe it's like you try and figure out how to form a partnership with Woolworths, where they have exclusive, like, you can only use this app with Woolworths, right? And then, bam, they pay for it. So all their prices go up by 1 cent to cover the, so there's like lots of different ways there. This kind of falls into a similar area, which is channels. It's like, okay, well, you have a cool app, but how are you going to get it to them? Another startup I think I helped in 2019, they wanted to build an app that was like on campus would tell people where it was quiet or free to, like, easy to, like, free places to sit. Like your busy day on campus, not that exists anymore. Where is a quiet place I can go? I'd like to sit down and like eat my lunch quietly. I'd like to work somewhere. So we went through that with them, and channels was quite easy. Channels was like, well, your uni's the obvious channel. You're a student here, you can probably like, other people here, like your first thing is UNSW students. Okay, what happens after that? Well, you branch out to other uni students, and then maybe one day you can go to shopping centers, right? So like sometimes you might call that like go to market, in terms of like, okay, how do I start from here and get everyone? Like, what's my strategy to go through various channels of stuff? Unfair advantage is kind of a strange concept, but basically it's like, okay, genius, you've got this idea to like have food expire, an app to help people not throw out food. Okay, say someone comes along tomorrow with this exact same idea, why are you still going to win, right? Why are you still in a better position? There could be a lot of answers to that. If like, here's an example. If I had some like app I was building that like made university life better, then someone else came along, well, it's like I talk to 700 of you every week, right? So that's like my unfair advantage, is that I have a megaphone at UNSW. So if I was trying to sell something at UNSW, right, that would be an example of an unfair advantage. It's something that's unique to you or your team of people that other people don't have. And that is relevant, because like that's going to be a standard question people ask. They're like, okay, why you? Great idea. I like your idea. I'd love to help, but it's like, sell me on why Google won't just do this themselves in a week. Your target customers, who are you targeting? Poor people, rich people, young people, old people, like cis men, cis women, like whatever. Anything in that bracket. And then probably the most important one in the middle is the UVP, or the unique value proposition, which is basically you trying to describe in a sentence what you are doing and why it matters. Like, why are you bringing unique value to things? So we're building an app that, makes sure people don't ever have to throw out food again without ever giving it any thought. There you go. There's your selling point. Like, sell it to me. Tell me why it's special. Because you say, okay, we'll make sure that like people don't have to throw food out again. They say, okay, well, that's cool. There's value in that, but like I already do that. I have a to-do list at home, and every time I buy food, I make a note of it, or I label it on the food, and I mark it, and I organize it by shelves, right? There's already solutions to this problem, but like, why is there unique value in what you're doing? And in that case, it might not just be that you don't have them throw out food, but it's also that you have them not have to worry about it, not have to think about it, not have to manage it or track it, right? So, and this is the hardest one to get right. And that's kind of like how you would describe what you're doing to anyone. You know, and I know there's this big kind of thing, personal projects, blah, 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 CSE, so forth. You know, if you have personal projects or anything like that, or, you know, you poke around with a friend, or you do anything really where you're trying to build something that people like, which is most things, think about it in this context, because this is a way to add value to it. And basically, what every person who builds a product is trying to achieve is this notion of product market fit, or PMF. And product market fit is basically, did you connect the left side to the right side? Is what you're doing so uniquely valued, and you built the right thing that solves the right problem for the right people? Because there are markets out there that are hungry. And I use the same example to people. The to-do list market, right? Does anyone notice this, that like everyone has a different to-do list? Like, I have seen countless to-do list apps. I've seen people use their calendars, like text files, sticky notes. I use the HackMD site that you might have used in Shoots. People use everything, right? Tons of to-do apps on their phone and stuff like this, or built-in ones for Mac or whatever. That's a market that there's people craving things for, but no one has quite fit that market yet. Whereas if you look at other things, right, like Slack is a good example, for those of you who are familiar with Slack. Slack was a good example of something that had a product market fit, where Slack came along as a quality product to solve the like instant messaging group problem. And then they found a market, which is people craving something that is like more dynamic than emails, but still is organized, you know, not Facebook groups, like emails to Facebook groups, right? And then they just had one of the most successful product market fit stories ever. And that's kind of like what you're doing. So it doesn't matter if your app is cool if no one wants it. It doesn't matter if the market's there if you can't build what they want, right? So product market fit is basically the objective of you trying to build any sort of product that people like. And in summary, if you ever think I'd like to build a good product and I'd like to make sure people actually like it, the lean canvas is generally a good way to try and write down your thoughts somewhere, keep it in a Google Doc together. And then this is a great book to read if you actually take things more seriously. I mean, this is not something I would generally read unless you like have some time. But the thing is, like, I know these things say like startup in them, right? But the whole point of a small company is that small companies don't have time to do things that waste time. They don't have time to build something big that they don't know if anyone likes, because they just don't have the resources. Big tech companies have this capability, right? They have this amazing ability to just like just crash money on things like Google Plus. Remember Google? Does anyone remember Google Plus? Does anyone even know what happened to Google Glasses? Or like it's like a whole bunch of crap that these big companies make that just like never go anywhere, right? And that's fine. They know that. They're taking bets. They're doing like these big things to try and make things work. And sometimes they work and they make a ton of money, right? That's the whole story about Amazon Web Services. AWS was like, Amazon started these like 10 things and most of them were stupid. And now AWS makes half their money. Like the world's biggest company basically makes half their money off an idea that they were like, yeah, maybe this is dumb. But you know, there are good principles you can take away from having to think lean in terms of, you know, always asking yourself the question, do we know why we're doing what we're doing? How do we know we're doing it right? Stuff like that. Yeah, Yuval says Airbnb came out when people started having money after, I think the GFC it must have been, and wanted to go for vacations. They gave them a perfect market. Yep. Yeah, like Slack is very well liked. What's incredible about Slack is one of the biggest indicators of a high product market fit is referrals. How many people sign up because someone else told them to? Like, it's the most fascinating thing. If anyone here has used Slack, there's a near guaranteed chance that you use it because someone you know was like, let's use this. not because you Googled instant messaging thing or because you saw a Slack ad somewhere. Some of you would have, but it's like, that's kind of the truest sign of if you've really like got a product in the right market, is if people just like using it and then they tell other people about it, and you have to use like fairly limited stuff. Yeah, it's really incredible. So, but you know, unfair advantage, right? Slack was started by some really, really influential people. I don't know who they were. I mean, it's like Slack founders. Slack Technologies. That's so funny. Founders. Oh, maybe they were bankrolled by some really smart people. Oh yeah, so the person that started Slack was like, started Flickr, right? Which, I mean, I've never really used Flickr, but like, that was a big product for a while. Then this other person looks like just a, I don't really know these people, so I'm not going to guess, but yeah, okay, so they were at Flickr. So these like people with massive networks, so that would be their unfair advantage, right? They just have massive networks and a massive experience building a business. So, okay, that's about it. Any other questions about this stuff? Happy to give you all a bit of an early mark. You can ask a question on the assignment. I could probably only answer general questions here. But like if it's general enough, then yeah, I can answer it here. I know there's a lot of forum questions. I will get through them, or Tam will get through them, or someone will get through them. Suppose a group isn't able to do a route from lack of skill. Should they develop a route that has just the appropriate return value implemented? Because if they don't, it will crash front end. That's a good question. So you do get some marks for front end. It's pretty minimal though. Like your tutor's just going to open it up and click through it. If you see them like click through literally goddamn everything and there's one problem and they're like not good, then just tell me, because that's not what we asked them to do. But generally we're trying to see that you actually like, it does a couple things. One is it sees that you can actually like make sure something works, and B is it helps give them a sanity check that your stuff works. Because obviously, like, if your front end works and you get 0 in the auto marks, then the tutor's like, oh, okay, well, clearly this is not a problem. This is clearly something small, and you've probably done reasonable, right? So it has a few purposes, but so like yes, if there's some random route like password reset or profile upload, then like yeah, just stubbing the data's okay. I mean, yeah, you will fail the test, but the front end will work. But I guess I'd also say if it's a really minor route that the front end doesn't use much, then I probably won't make a big difference, because it's probably not going to get like, you know, if the front end uses it a lot, like if it's like users get all or it's like channel details or something, then like you should probably just implement it even if it's stubbed. But otherwise, yeah. Yeah, for profile upload, I would just say to them, like, you know, we didn't do it. Because, like, if they can use your front end and not everything works, that's normal, right? Like, we're literally just, yeah. Will we be testing the back end locally or on always data? It's a really interesting question, because, I've been so fascinated by the number of students that have thought we're going to be testing it on always data. We're absolutely only testing it locally. The point of the always data deployment was to get people to get people familiar, maybe uncomfortably, with some basic kind of deployment. And the way your tutor's going to check that is they will literally just, like, you give them the domain, and they'll go to like domain/users/all/v1 or something, and it'll return an empty list. Because like it either works or it doesn't, right? Do you know what I mean? Like either you've deployed it or you haven't. There's not a lot of mid ground, and you all know this, right? Like it's not like you're like half my routes work and the other half give me a connection problem. It's like it's either running or it's not, and we're just trying to make sure that you can make it run. So and I'll just give a blanket comment again about how I think it's been good seeing everyone kind of step up and solve so many of these problems, because this is a new topic, naturally we're a little bit slower to find your problem, right? Like, and I know that might be a little frustrating sometimes, but also there's like 100 things you guys get really quick answers from, because in other terms, like students like, oh, PyTest can't be found. We're like, well, we know what that is, because in 20T1 no one knew what it was because we hadn't seen that problem before. So every time you're made miserable by it, think about all the good things. Yeah, so when you submit the assignment, you should just keep it as localhost. Like you just deploy it. If it's on the internet, you're like, great, leave it alone and forget about it. We're just trying to see that you can follow some instructions and get it up on the internet. And if anyone does anything, like they submit their assignment with like the always data URL and you fail all the auto tests or something, we'll happily let you change your code without any mark losses or anything. So don't stress out about it. Don't worry about your tests. Just it's like your tutor's literally going to load up one route and be like, did they deploy it? That's it. In future times we might go crazier, but like you this is not easy for some people, right? So whenever we introduce new concepts, we keep it very small and very narrow. It's like, just do this. And you'll talk to friends in a year and they'll be like, oh man, we had to like deploy our front end as well and all this, and you'll be like, cool. Chris says, I also deploy the front end code on always data. Is that okay? I do not need to connect to front end by using a command in terminal. Yeah, that's great. I mean, you could probably sell that as bonus marks to the tutor if you manage to do that. Like if it's totally independent of anything you run locally, like if you've made an app online that you could just send to a friend and they could use with you, then cool. Yeah, make sure you put that in your bonus marks, because that's a cool thing. Domain name throwing errors. Backend works. I mean, again, you'll have to post on the forum for that, because I'll need to look at it. But I made a post earlier today, a couple hours ago, where I was basically just like, I basically just said to people, hey, if you had problems, can you share them? If you had problems and solutions, can you share them here? Because you got to remember that like we don't just know every single problem that exists in the universe, right? And a lot of the time when you run into random problems that are super random, we only know them because we had other student run into them some other time. So I put this up. So if you have solved your problem and you know what it was, just share it here if you have the time. No one has to, but like it helps other people, and it's a place where you can hopefully go. I've also been pinning some posts that I think are kind of relevant to deployment, and I've seen people solve like this one here. This one here, this one here, that's lab 9. Yeah, there's some there, so check that out. Cool, anything else? Alright, I might wrap it up here. We have our exam lecture tomorrow. I don't think it'll go for more than an hour. It's at 10 a.m. You have your project due at 1. I know most of you won't come, that's fine. You'll probably just watch the recording. I know some of you will finish. tonight and come anyway. So I'll see those people then. Otherwise, I'll see you in the recording. And for those who it's their last live lecture, which I assume will be a chunk of you because of tomorrow, thanks for coming live for the term, because there's many repeats, so it always makes the atmosphere a lot more vibrant. And yeah. Yes, I'm gonna stop the recording.